Hello, everybody. This is the Locked On Big 12 Conference crossover. I am Josh Neighbors, the host of Locked On Big 12. To my right, he is back. It is Steven Simcox. He is the host of Locked On Horn Frogs. To his right, it is Linda Godfrey. She is the host of Locked On Pokes. Below her, it is Jake Hatch. He is the host of Locked On Cougars. And then to his left, it is John Williams, the host of Locked On Sooners. We've made it through the football season. We've made it. We're going to talk about making it through, talk about some of our thoughts about the championship game last night, and also some thoughts about where the Big 12 is as a conference. But first, got to cue the music if I can find it. There it is.
You are Locked On Big 12. Your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, so once again, we've made it through the football season, and this is not me complaining at all. I just think generally my first thought was like, this was one of the more exhausting college football seasons I can remember. Now, it was rewarding. I will say the fourth quarter last night was very entertaining between Georgia and Alabama. Stetson Bennett with the YOLO Aaron Rodgers free play ball was fantastic. Georgia got a, once again, much deserved national championship. But I will say, like, that's kind of the feeling is like with everything that happened, right? We had NIL, which was positive. We had the transfer portal, which was positive in some respects. We had the coaches getting fired early because of early signing day, which was kind of an unintended consequence. Steven, right there, yeah, was an interesting wrinkle that I don't think we all expected. Tons of playoff expansion talk that kind of ended the conversation with the playoff committee this week that sounded like it was not that productive, and we're kind of stuck. So once again, I enjoyed the season. I had a lot of fun, and I'm not complaining about covering college football. It was a really fun time. But just kind of looking back, Steven, I'll go to you first. Like, how do you feel? How do you feel about the football season that we just watched in college?
I mean, I feel pretty good. I think it was interesting to see Georgia finally get over the hump. That was nice. I feel like that was a good wrinkle. It was still two SEC teams, which I know is grating for a lot of folks. It was an exhausting season in a lot of ways. It felt like going into the year, and this is not just specific to college football. I think this is more the nation as a whole. We had sort of gotten past the COVID crisis, and that was in the rearview mirror, and obviously that's not the case. It's still very much present. It's still very much something that is affecting sports as well as general life. And there was just a lot of changes that happened, and I think unintended consequences that came with it, whether it be the transfer portal and more autonomy for players, which is a good thing. I think we can all agree it is. But there are a lot of wrinkles that come with that, or NIL and trying to regulate and figure out what that means and how to come up with some sort of, balance in college football. But I think ultimately it's all about perspective. Like if you are someone who really hones in and focuses on the playoff and the national title, then you're probably still really disappointed that there's not more parity, that there's not more teams that are in the hunt, even though we did see Cincinnati break through and we saw Georgia win it all. But if you just look at it as a crazy sport where there's a lot of different things that can happen, and there's a number of different barometers for success for specific programs, I think that's where the charm of college football is. And I hope we don't lose that in sort of the professionalism of the sport. But definitely a long, grueling season for everybody. And as we were talking about off air, Josh, it just feels like it continues.
Right. Yes.
We're the day after the national title game. I mean, in my case, TCU hasn't been playing for a month, and it still feels like I can't really talk much basketball because every day there's somebody entering the portal or somebody who's signing with the team. There's just news constantly, which is probably good overall, but it makes for weird rhythms in the sports calendar.
Yes. Linda, I'll go to you on this. Do you think that media types such as ourselves and kind of the bigger media types that we hear a lot, do you think some of their complaining kind of made it feel like there was a whole lot of hand-wringing about the portal and about NIL? And ultimately, in my opinion, it was kind of, at least the NIL stuff was a whole lot to do about nothing. just in my opinion, I think it's it was just making public a lot of the stuff that we already knew was happening in college football. Do you feel like media types kind of complaining about this stuff made the
Made
season
it worse.
made it
Yeah,
worse?
yeah.
Or were you one of those people who were able to compartmentalize it and kind of enjoy the season and just go, you shut up, you guys, it's fine.
I mean, it was a great season. It ended with a fantastic game. I felt very similar to how the NFL ended with the Raiders Chargers game, just both like a very solid reminder of why I love the sport of football so much. But it was especially from the end of regular season through bowl games with all the coaching changes that happened, and in the Big 12 circuit with Lincoln Riley and the bomb that he dropped. It's been every day something like huge that you have to cover. It's been exhausting. It's like the end of a run where you're like, you have to kind of sprint through it. But I don't know. I'm not a runner. I don't think you're supposed to sprint at the end, but that's what it felt like we were doing. It just every day was like another hit and another wave in a tidal wave of off-season college football. So it was worth it, but it was exhausting.
John,
And they did make it worse, by the way. They did definitely make it worse.
John, did you this year feel like you were the runner who was on the run, who was like, you know what, I'm going to sprint this last 100 yards, and you looked up and you're like, I'm a mile and a half from home? What the hell, man? Like, it must have felt like that was you this year. You're like, there's still this much more, shit, for lack of a better term, that I have to talk about with this season. So I'm going to ask that part first. Part two, because you had a lot of stuff going on. Give us something positive from this year. Make us feel good. So go ahead, John. I'll give you the floor here.
Well, yeah, I'll say Cincinnati actually getting a shot in the college football playoff. I think that is great for college football. Just giving them an opportunity. Yes, they got beat by multiple scores by an Alabama team that was really, really good. But just getting them into the playoff, I think that is a big step for college football. Other positive things, I mean, I feel like this year, the fact that the Heisman race wasn't like locked up by November was kind of cool. Like you saw names like Aiden Hutchinson being thrown in there, Will Anderson. Like it got to the point where people were wondering, should a running back win it? Should a wide receiver win it? Ultimately, Bryce Young had the nice final couple games of the season to really solidify himself as the Heisman winner. But I thought that was a really fascinating aspect of the college football season. When Spencer Rattler kind of fell by the wayside and then Caleb Williams had his dud against Baylor, it kind of took them out of the running. Then it just kind of really opened it up for all kinds of possibilities. It was a really fascinating year, especially, as far as Big 12 play is concerned, because Oklahoma, Iowa State were the two teams that were supposed to be in the Big 12 title game. Neither one of them made it. Iowa State had a disappointing year after being a preseason top 10. Oklahoma, obviously the same. And it was neat to see, as much as I was disappointed in Oklahoma's season, it was really cool to see Baylor's turnaround happen as quickly as it did under Dave Aranda.
Jay, how are you feeling now? We're 1 day removed from the season. Like, give this a rating out of 10. What would you give the college football season?
Considering BYU now a member of the Big 12 conference, you got to give it a pretty good. You got to give it a pretty good rating.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. If you're out here a BYU fan, you're just ecstatic to be a member of the Power Five. And I thought it was a fun season. I thought there was a lot of chaos. COVID obviously wreaked havoc in some ways with it, but I'm with John. It was fun to have the Heisman Trophy actually kind of be a mystery up until the final weeks of the season. In many ways, this felt like a little bit of a throwback to a previous era of college football versus what we've kind of been used to the last, I'd say, decade or so, where it seems like you already can, about mid-season, you know who the number one team is, you know who the favorite is going to win the national championship, you know who that Heisman Trophy favorite is going to be. It was just nice to have some, I guess, questions about what was happening with the sport overall.
Right. I mean, I know we always complain about Alabama, but Alabama did throw a wrench into that with their win over Georgia. You kind of have to shout that out, right? I mean, it did make us question, all right, how good are they? How good is Alabama? Is that one-off? And we will have to give them that. All right. So I've got a point I want to run by you guys. First, quick word from our sponsors here. Today's show is brought to you all by Built Bar. Go to built.com today. That is built.com. You guys can check out all of the Built Bars that they've got there. Wow, John, product placement. There we go. Look at that. He's got what flavor is that?
Oh, that's the peanut butter brownie. That's the bomb flavor right there.
Peanut butter brownie right there. John's got it. You guys can use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com today. Built bars can be a great part of any New Year's resolution, especially if it involves eating things that taste good or eating healthier things or both. How about both those things? You can put those together. Once again, built.com today. Also, our show is brought to you by Get Upside, new app that allows you guys to save at the pump. We all know in this economy, you definitely want to be saving at the pump. All right. We're blaming Joe Biden for the high gas price. Just kidding. That's not what we're doing here. We're saving money on gas with Get Upside. You guys can download the app today. Use the promo code SCORE, SCORE, SCORE. Well, SCORE score. We can spell at the University of Missouri. They taught us that. Once again, promo code SCORE, and that'll allow you guys to get up to 50 cents off the first time at the pump, up to 25 cents off other times you guys go to the pump. Once again, Get Upside, promo code SCORE. Ugh, that was a rough one for me, folks. All right. So I want to make this point to you all. We talked about playoff expansion recently, and just thinking about, the gap, right? There is a gap between other conferences pretty clearly. The Big Ten's best got smacked around this year by Georgia. Cincinnati put up a decent fight. I mean, they put up fights that we've seen pretty comparable to other teams who have come. I'd say that their performance kind of reminded me actually of Notre Dame's last year. Respectable. Was it competitive? No. Respectable. Very much so. So talking about bridging the gap, right? To me, that was a big reason why we talked about college football playoff expansion. Just it starts bridging the gap with having more teams in the playoff. And my colleague at SiriusXM, Gabe Eichert, made this point. Did we all enjoy the Raiders and Chargers game the other night? For those of us who were awake for it, I'm not going to knock anybody for not being awake. But do we all enjoy it? Yes.
Yeah,
Does anybody
I'm going to knock on you if you were sleeping, by the way.
Yes, not going to do it. Also, the last ride took forever. Does anybody here believe either of those teams had a chance to win the Super Bowl?
No.
I'm going to go with no. Chargers, maybe an outside shot. But, I mean, the Raiders, it feels like, after watching the Raiders play the Chiefs twice this year, oh, good Lord. I don't think that was going to be the case. And the Chargers down the stretch were leaking a little bit of oil there towards the end. But here's the thing. Did it make it any less exciting or enjoyable? No, it didn't. So apply the same logic to a 7 versus 10 or whatever the numbers would end up being. For a 5-12, for a 6-11, a 7-10, an 8-9. Will the 7 or the 10 probably win the championship? No. Would it make a dramatic overtime shootout more exciting where Matt Corral is going up and trying to score against, let's just say, Oklahoma State's defense? No, it'd make it exciting in my opinion. So I thought, as great as last night was, I want to see the two best teams. We can have the expansion, get the same result, and still enjoy everything in between. Steven, am I crazy here for thinking this radical idea?
No, you're not. I mean, how awesome would it have been if Ohio State Utah was a playoff game, right? Like, I know there was a lot of opt-outs there. Like, Jake was following that game really closely. But even with the opt-outs, you had a coming out party for Jackson Smith-Njigba, the Rockwall, Texas product. He was an absolute stud. You had Utah scoring like crazy as well. It was a great football game, and it would have been even cooler if there were more stakes. Like, are we still going to get to the ultimate conclusion, which is probably the evil empire, Alabama playing for a title against, plug-in other team, and there's a decent chance Bama's going to win even though it didn't happen this year? Yes, but we're talking about having more football, more meaningful football, and I feel like it would be a good balance of, when we talk about opt-outs during bowl season, a lot of that's happening in some of these upper-tier bowl games. Like, you have a weird gap between – like 6-6 Power 5 and Group of 5 teams that are playing one more game. Most of those young men are going to play. It's an exhibition. It's, something you have on in the background during Christmas festivities, so you don't have to talk to your girl, your sister's weird boyfriend or whatever. Like, it's just programming for ESPN. And then you have the middle, which is these other bowl games that aren't the playoff, but they're, Power 5 teams that had good seasons or maybe had seasons under their expectations. Well, you have more opt-outs than that. So if you made some of those playoff games, you give more incentive for those guys to play and just figure it out. Like, I don't understand the NCAA college football. All their decision-making boils down to, is this going to make me more money? Like, that's really usually what it comes down to. So I think this is a way to make more money. So it seems like a no-brainer. Just find out a way to do it. If it means you have to eliminate games against FCS schools, and I know that, those schools need those paycheck games, but maybe you turn those into preseason exhibitions. Like, there's ways around some of these problems. I just don't understand this idea of like, well, the 12 seed's not going to win the championship. Well, the 66 team in the NCAA tournament usually don't win the championship either, but we watch them play on a random Tuesday night. We're looking there. We're like, oh, no, I don't get True TV. I didn't know I didn't have True TV. Now I got to find True TV. I got to see if my brother-in-law has a login to True TV because I want to watch St. Mary's face Monmouth and see some post player, miss a bunch of baby hooks. Like, we're going to watch these games. So give it to me. Give me the content.
I will say it's very good because the NCAA tournament has playing games between 16 seeds, which is like, to me, which is like one of the dumbest things that they've ever done. But it's like, you know what?
Hey.
And I don't mean to cross these schools.
Hampton and Texas Southern.
I was going to say, whenever Hampton plays Texas Southern, I'm like always dialed into that game because
we're going to tweet about it. We're just going to tweet about how we hate it, but we're going to watch it.
Yeah, it's Hampton's bench also does a thing where like they bring their energy and they stomp and clap. I love it. I just love all of that.
Yeah.
Jake, how surprised were you this week when you saw the fact the College Football Playoff Committee, it sounds like they're really far apart on a number of issues, considering the point Steven just made that all of this comes down to money and this would make them more money?
It's strange to me because Bob Bowlesby came out and said these people just need to pull their heads out of what and figure it out. That's
right.
that's the message I got from him and his comments about it. The thing about it is, it sounds like Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, is essentially trying to, the way it was described, as a one-man war to make it an 18 playoff to essentially force Notre Dame's hand to join the ACC in football.
Right.
Here's the thing. Notre Dame will not be coerced in doing whatever you want them to do. That's first thing. And just figure it out. The ACC is like the Pac-12. I live in Pac-12 country out here. And obviously it's Big 12 country. It's going to be split because Utah and BYU are 40 miles apart. But the Pac-12 and the ACC are at a disadvantage right now. They need a 12-team playoff. They need to get themselves opportunities to get into that field because annually these two conferences just beat the crap out of each other, and they have a team that wins the conference that's 9-3 and 10-2. As it's currently constituted, you're not getting in the playoff with that record. So just figure it out. And we had Tim Brando on my radio show earlier today, actually, funny enough, and he's of the opinion that these conferences are going to milk every bit of money they can get in their new TV deals out of these networks, and then they will revisit this and say, okay, how much money can we get for the playoff to add to our coffers? That's how he thinks it's going to play out. He thinks the TV deals come first, and then the playoff happens.
Right, because the Big 12 is coming up here in 2025, so we'll see how that one transpires. Yeah. John, your thoughts on Greg Sankey is just like, look, we love 12. We don't need it. We're like, we get to it every single year. Like, we don't really, we're just kind of here for the party. Like, if you want to do 12, we'll do 12. You guys want to stick with 4? I mean, look at our championship game we got right now. Like, we'll keep the 4 thing going too. So your thoughts on old Uncle Sankey, who is, I mean, ostensibly the most powerful person in the room, yet like the one who's like, look, what are we doing here, folks?
Yeah, I think he's got a great point. What is the SEC? I mean, the thing they have to gain from an expanded playoff is a third team in the playoff. Right. I mean, there are some years where they're going to have 3, maybe 4 of the top 12. And now you have the automatic bids that kind of go into play in there, but there's a good chance that they'll get 3 teams in a lot of years. And so, I mean, he does have that to benefit from, but yeah, I mean, the SEC is going to be fine. Alabama is going to be fine. Georgia is going to continue to be a contender. I think what they did in the national championship game is just going to continue to further their ability to land big time recruits to compete with Alabama and continue to contend. And so, I mean, the SEC's got a great point. I think, like Jake said, I mean, it's up to the other schools that want to be in the playoff and have more meaningful football games like Steven talked about. it's up to them to like make sure this happens and get it figured out, because the SEC is not going to lose out on this. They're going to be fine. It's the rest of the conferences that, the Big 12 that sat out of the playoff, the ACC, the Pac-12. I mean, 3 of the Power 5 were not part of the playoff this year, and a lot of it's due to the parity in the conferences. But that's also because there's just 4 teams that get in. And if you're going to have the leagues that you have, and you're proud of your parity, if you're Bob Bowlesby, you enjoy the fact that your teams do play each other difficultly, and it's not easy to win a Big 12 championship. And so, but you got to figure out a way to get your guys to the dance and get them in the playoff. The other thing I would like to say is, like, I wasn't watching that Chargers Raiders game until like midway through the fourth quarter, but because I'm following it on social media, I'm like, okay, I got to go watch this football game.
Right.
2 9-7 teams that the whole sports world cared about. The regular season continued to matter, even though they were 9-7 teams. And I also think back to the Giants teams that won the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think going into the playoff, anybody thought that those teams were going to win the Super Bowl, especially when they went up against the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl. But they did it. And so you give teams an opportunity to get hot, like we talked about last week, by condensing the schedule a little bit, not giving teams a month off. What would Cincinnati have been able to do if they didn't have a month off? Because their offense, a lot of it is based on timing and spacing and speed. You take a month off, and that disrupts all of that.
In a month for the best coach in the sport to prepare for it too.
Exactly. And so, like, if you don't have all of those elements at play, does it give some of these lesser teams an opportunity to knock off a higher ranked team? Possibly. Yeah. And that's the thing we love about March Madness, is there's always the possibility of an upset.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And to your point, March Madness, like, you oftentimes have at most 4 days to prepare for. And I'm not saying there should be 4 days from football, but 4 days to prepare for a team. And then also you got a day off, right, for your next game. You get 1 day off after playing a tournament game, and you got your next opponent going there. Linda, this kind of conversation about 12-team playoff. 3 Big 12 teams finish in the AP top 10 to end the year. So, thinking about, at this point in time, like, the Big 12 would have an argument for at least 2 teams to get in the dance, maybe a third, this season. And 12 sounds good to all of us here, I think, for those reasons, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think any expansion is good expansion. And to Steven's point about, like, players not opting out because there's kind of more at stake, then we don't have to hear the commentators talking about players opting out or not opting out, which would be nice. I think that would benefit everybody as well. I just don't see anything wrong with expanding it, except for that they made the decision however many years ago that it was going to be 4 teams, and now they have to go, maybe it was a bad idea and we should revisit it. And, like, that doesn't seem like an NCAA kind of thing to do. So it's like a pride thing.
Yeah. I also want to mention on the Notre Dame point that was brought up, Jack Swarbrick has already said, right, he was just fine with not having an automatic bid. I think that was kind of the way he expressed it last time around. So, that is one thing. Like, look, I'm not a Notre Dame guy, to be totally honest, but if they're willing to be like, look, we don't want an automatic bid, now they'll probably they usually get one just with their things work out for them. But, like, look, okay, it's fine. It's cool with me. Like, I will co-sign with that if they don't want to. Go ahead, Jake.
Well, to that point, Swarbrick was part of the committee that made the original proposal for this 12-team deal, and he signed off on it. He said, we're okay. We as Notre Dame, we are okay not being among those automatic bids because we aren't tied to a conference. So he signed off on it. What's the holdup here?
Right. Something I want to mention also too, the opt-out point, because it's been something we talked about a lot. The Jamison Williams injury last night sucked to see. It does bring up an interesting point where, like, bailing on your team to play for a title, like playing for a title, is not something we want to see happen. But there's a chance he cost himself some form of 7 figures last night. Blowing the ACL out like less than 4 months before the draft. If you're a GM, so let's just say, like, you're a team that's going to be drafting a wide receiver, and I think the Cowboys maybe a year or so ago, a good example, or a couple years ago, whenever they drafted CeeDee Lamb, good example here. And you're trying to get a receiver that can play now and help you win now, and you're kind of in that 15, whatever range you want to pick. Like, do you take the Garrett Wilson? Do you take the Jamison Williams? does Jameis Williams now become an example? Now, I will say to kind of a player like that's credit. Jalen Waddle's an example of somebody who was hurt, was fine before the draft, if I remember correctly, and then was good. It was good to go and has done really well in the NFL. But anybody have any thoughts on that? And maybe is Jameson Williams' injury last night a harbinger of things to come, or of kids maybe making a choice? Anybody have any? Linda, I'll go to you. I know you're a draft person, NFL person.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously injuries and past decisions and all kinds of insane shit always comes to light during draft season. Like it gets weird. Everybody thinks they know what teams are going to do. You never know. I don't think I could ever like harp on a kid for choosing to opt out, regardless of what the game, like the stakes of the game are. I just think a lot more of those young men would stay in for the idea of winning a national championship. I don't think it'll be some, it's sad. It's awful what happened to him as soon as the injury occurred. It was, I follow a lot of physical therapists and doctors on Twitter that tweet about injuries and what they see from video. And it was immediately pretty,
it was you could tell it was an ACL immediately.
Yeah, it was fast. And so, that sucks. And it's going to be a rough draft season for him, but he has such good tape. I don't think it'll be much of an issue, especially with how fast injuries are. People are recovering from injuries right now. I mean, we just saw Cam Akers have an Achilles injury and he's back the same season. It's insane how much faster these players are like getting healthier.
Yeah. I think to your point, like if a kid ever wanted to opt out though, they'd be like, do you guys see Jameson Williams' knee? Like,
yeah,
am I going to take that chance? This is non-contact too. Anybody else on this before we move on?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think the difference being, and we kind of talked about it, I think last week and Linda touched on it, is the idea of playing for a national championship is going to hold a lot of water for players, and it would ring out to front office people and coaches as well if a kid decided to opt out of playing for a championship. I don't think that would kind of bode well for them in this idea of like, hey, do they love football? Because they already asked that question about kids already, and they're going to ask it even more if they opt out of a chance to play for a title. I don't think that that's the slope that we're headed down, but it will lead to more of the kind of the exhibition bowl game opt-outs, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. All right, one more word from our sponsors here before we get some final thoughts. Our show is brought to you all by NetSuite from Oracle. Over 28,000 businesses have made the change to NetSuite, and your small business can do the same today. If you go to netsuite.com/locked, that's netsuite.com/LOCKED locked. You guys, they have a new financing package today. If you go there, your small business can switch over. It's the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth with visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, planning, budgeting, and more. NetSuite is everything you need to grow all in one place. Once again, netsuite.com/locked, LOCKED. All right, folks. So kind of winding down here. And I already asked for some positivity in terms of things. I'll ask for it once again here. So does anybody want to just give a fun moment, something they enjoyed from this season? So first of all, plug your stuff and where people can find the show, and just a fun thought, something you enjoyed, something that made you smile this year. It can be anywhere in college football. So Steven, I'll go to you first. Where can people find you and your work, and also give us something fun?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at SimcockSteven. The show is at Locked On TCU. Man, that's tough. There were a lot of good stories. I was fascinated last night by the Stetson Bennett narrative. I'm really happy for him. I think he's, he made some throws when he had to, and it is an amazing story. Like, fan of the team, walk on, came back, won the starting job. But I'm also sort of like, that was like the Georgia defense that got that done last night.
Do you think Kirby had one finger on the eject button? I mean, he had to after that first half.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes, that's my point. Like, they were calling for JT Daniels in the first half of that game. And he made it happen when he had to. And I think he's going to be the best used car salesman in Athens, Georgia for a long time. But I don't know if my man should have gotten the MVP. But hey, you enjoy it. It's a cool story. That Georgia team was a lot of fun. And I'm happy for Kirby Smart. He seems like a cool dude. And yeah, that's one of the many great stories from this year. I'll also briefly say I really enjoyed UTSA, the run they went on with Jeff Traylor this season. That was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, couldn't go undefeated throughout the entire year, but that was a cool story in college football as well.
Did you plug your stuff too? I forgot if you did or not.
I did, yeah.
Okay, cool.
The podcast is Locked On Horned Frogs. You can find it, anywhere you get your pods.
Cool. Linda.
I'm going to plug at the end because that feels more like the direction I should go. But listen, I did not think Oklahoma State would go on the run that they did this season. My hopes were not near as high as they were at the end of the season. I am still thinking about how we didn't win the Big 12 championship. This is supposed to be a positivity corner, but it like every night I just lay in bed and think about the 6 tries from the 1 yard line and not being able to get in the end zone. But as a whole, like if I stand back and think about, I talked about the Cowboys before the season started, we surpassed like every expectation I set. And then last night, I'm a sucker for the walk-on Stetson Bennett story. Like I was all for it. He didn't get near as emotional as I wanted him to. He was pretty stoic, I feel like. But as a whole, that's the kind of stuff I love about college football. And then you can find me on Twitter at Lindellians, and the show is Locked On Pokes on all your podcast apps.
Jake.
All right, I'm going to follow kind of Linda's lead on this. The Stetson Bennett thing is fun because those of you who watched the Rose Bowl, I think most of you probably did, Utah's quarterback Cam Rising got injured in that game. They brought in a walk-on quarterback in that game. Not many people probably know this. He is from a 1A high school here in the state of Utah. It is the smallest high school in the state that plays 11-man football. It is a tiny place. It's an outpost, and he comes in and tosses a touchdown pass in the Rose Bowl, stuff like that. Stetson Bennett, hats off to you. On the BYU front, I already talked about the fact that Cougars making the Big 12. That's the big story, the fact that they have made it to the big time. Other thing, Tyler Algier, he goes out and breaks Luke Staley's single-season rushing mark at BYU. It's 20 years old. That record had been set in 2001. Staley won the Doak Walker Award when he ran for 1,500-plus yards in 2001. Cool to see Tyler Algier break that and wish him the best as he moves on now to the NFL. And then if you want to follow my work, just check out Locked On Cougars on your preferred social media feeds or on your podcast provider of choice. My personal work, you can find me on Twitter. Jacob C. Hatch is the handle.
And John Williams.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep my focus down south of me here in Oklahoma. We're gonna be looking at the Texas Longhorns. 2 things that I really, really enjoyed. First of all, we're going to look at Kansas's win over the Longhorns, sealed by a fullback 2-point conversion make. So that's always good stuff. So shout out to Kansas and Lance Leipold for getting that dub. And then secondly, just the Red River Showdown comeback. I mean, that one was incredible. It's such a roller coaster of emotions. I got back late from coaching my kids' soccer game, and I can't ever help but look at Twitter, even though I'm going to watch the game as I've got it recorded, and I'm watching, and I'm like seeing the score. I'm like, son of a, and now I'm like, I gotta keep watching this game, and I'm watching it, and I finally put my phone down so I can just watch the game, and then just like seeing the comeback happening. And the moment though that was my favorite moment in those games was Caleb Kelly's strip on the kickoff return by Xavier Worthy that led to a Kennedy Brooks touchdown. That moment for Caleb Kelly in particular, for the 6th-year senior who sat out all of 2020 due to an injury, it was incredible. It was phenomenal, and it just kind of furthered his like legacy there as an Oklahoma Sooner. Never like the greatest player, but one of the most beloved players. And then the moment after the game where he goes up and he tries to he finds Xavier Worthy and just offers encouragement, to a kid who had a fantastic game and just had one play that did not go his way. It was such a really heartwarming part of that whole ordeal. And in a season that was kind of frustrating at times, it's nice to think back on Caleb Kelly's kind of moment in the River Showdown.
Also plug your podcast and whatnot.
Oh yeah. Locked On Sooners, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, subscribe, like, Make sure you watch the episodes. And I may or may not talk about Caleb Williams. I'm sorry. It just may or may not happen. So,
I just want to shout out last night. There is a moment that I was like, this is Pete Kirby Smart. Did anybody else enjoy the hell out of the intentional grounding on a flea flicker? I mean, that was one of the worst coached and executed plays ever. Georgia gets 30 yards on their first two plays, the first drive, second half, then dials up the flea flicker. And George Pickens just looked like he quit in the route. I think it was George Pickens. Instead, it's like, oh, here comes Christian Harris. So I'm just going to throw it as far downfield as possible. And they cost them 9 yards and a down. And I was like, this is Kirby Smart's fake punt moment. Like, this is exactly what this is. This is horrible and awful. Was really glad to see that they were able to rebound from that. Two, Stetson Bennett getting dragged on Good Morning America, whatever the hell the show is, Michael Strahan this morning. Like, Stetson, how you doing, buddy? It's like, drunk. That's how I'm doing. Like, leave the young man alone. Why in the hell is this kid, after like the biggest moment of his entire life, being dragged on national? Stetson, how are you? Oh, so much fun last night. Like, please leave the poor child alone. 3, this sport. Is there anything that encapsulated this sport more than pull assassin? I mean, guys, we had a story in 2021 where a coach's wife's pet monkey that she used to do stripper acts, with, bit a child, and it became a news story. And poor Steve Sarkisian, who like had to deal with a lot of crap this year, and part of it self-inflicted, part of it was not, must have read that and been like, what the F? Like, expletive. And just the conversation that he must have had with Jeff Banks is like, hey, we have enough distractions around here. Your wife's monkey or girlfriend, whoever the hell it is, your girlfriend's monkey biting a child is in the news now. Like, rein it in at home, please, Jeff. Linda, you got something?
Wild. That story only lived for like 3 days. That's how busy this football season was, is that something else happened besides a stripper's monkey biting a child that we were like, this is
And it's
more
in the rear
important.
view, and now everybody's like, so Quinn Ewers, right?
I
What are you talking
totally
about?
forgot about it till just now. I'm happy about it.
John, this should have been your point. John, you should have been like, why are we talking about Quinn Ewers? Why we're forgetting about the monkey? Like, we should be revisiting the monkey story.
Kansas completely distracted me from the monkey story.
That is fair. That is fair. So I will say, like, this is, once again, we're going to miss it, but I'm a little college footballed out right now, but I'm sure in a week I'll like be missing the ridiculous, absurd conversations, debates, stories, all the things that we hear, about college football. So thanks to you all for making this fun season. Thanks to fans out there for listening and watching. You guys can find me on Twitter at @JoshNeighbors_. You can find the show at LO Big 12 on Twitter. You can find us wherever you guys get your podcasts, and you can find us on YouTube as well. All right, friends, till next week. I guess we're going to be a basketball podcast next week, right? I guess that's going to be Kobe. All right, we'll see you guys next week.